The sound of bone cracking echoed through the cafeteria like thunder. Hannah Mitchell lay sprawled across the cold linoleum floor, blood streaming from her nose and soaking her white shirt, while Derek Blackwood stood over her with his knees still stained crimson. 800 students, packed into Riverside High's cafeteria, froze in absolute silence, phones raised high, capturing every second. But instead of crying or begging, Hannah slowly wiped the blood from her lips and smiled, a chilling smile that made Derek take a step back. "Thank you for the evidence," she whispered, just loud enough for the hidden microphone in her collar to pick up. 3. She began counting down while reaching for her phone. 2. Derek's brow furrowed as unease crept in. 1. What happened next would turn Riverside High into the epicenter of the largest federal investigation in Texas history. The morning had started like any other Tuesday at Riverside High, with students shuffling through the hallways clutching coffee cups and complaining about Monday night homework. Hannah Mitchell had transferred in just 3 days ago, slipping into second-period algebra without drawing much attention. She was the kind of girl who seemed to disappear into the background. Average height, brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, clothes from discount stores rather than designer boutiques. But if you looked closely, really closely, you might notice something odd about the way she carried herself. Her sneakers showed unusual wear patterns on the soles, not from running or skateboarding, but from something else entirely. The small silver chain around her neck caught light in a way that suggested it wasn't ordinary jewelry. And when she wrote notes in class, she held her pen with the precision of someone trained in more than just academics. If this story reminds you of a time when you or someone you know had to face down a bully, hit that like button to support those brave enough to stand up against injustice. Sometimes one story can inspire someone who really needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the underdog has the biggest surprises waiting. Derek Blackwood ruled Riverside High with the kind of casual cruelty that comes from never facing consequences. As the sheriff's son and captain of the football team, he'd perfected the art of making other students' lives miserable while maintaining plausible deniability. His crew followed him like loyal soldiers. Marcus Webb, whose idea of problem-solving involved his fists. Kyle Rodriguez, who could turn someone's digital life into a nightmare within hours. And Brett Sullivan, who served as Derek's eyes and ears throughout the school. Together, they'd created an ecosystem of fear that even the teachers pretended not to see. The first sign that Hannah was different came during third-period history, when Derek made his usual rounds collecting lunch money from smaller students. He approached Hannah's desk with his trademark smirk, expecting the familiar routine of intimidation and submission. "New girl," he drawled, loud enough for the class to hear. "Welcome to Riverside. There's a tax for sitting in my section." Hannah looked up from her textbook, and for just a moment, Derek caught something in her eyes that didn't match her quiet demeanor. It was the look of someone calculating angles and distances, someone reading the room like a tactical assessment. "I think you're confused about local tax law," she replied calmly. "Extortion is a federal crime under Title 18, Section 1871 of the United States Code." The classroom went dead silent. Students exchanged glances, waiting for Derek's explosion. But Hannah's response was so unexpected, so precisely worded, that even Derek hesitated. How did a transfer student know federal criminal codes off the top of her head? And why wasn't she scared? He recovered quickly, though, his pride demanding action. "Smart mouth," he muttered, but something in Hannah's steady gaze made him move on to easier targets. That's when Marcus Webb stepped in during lunch period. While Derek preferred psychological warfare, Marcus solved problems with brute force. He cornered Hannah near the vending machines where fewer teachers would interfere. "Derek doesn't like smart girls," he announced, cracking his knuckles. "Maybe you need a lesson in keeping quiet." Hannah didn't flinch as Marcus moved closer. Instead, she shifted her weight almost imperceptibly, her feet finding positions that seemed random but weren't. When Marcus reached out to grab her arm, Hannah's reaction was lightning fast, not aggressive, but defensive. She redirected his momentum so smoothly that he found himself stumbling into the vending machine, more confused than hurt. The encounter lasted maybe 10 seconds, but word spread through the school like wildfire. The new girl had somehow made Marcus Webb look foolish without throwing a single punch. Students whispered in hallways about her strange calmness, her unusual knowledge, and the way she seemed to anticipate trouble before it arrived. Some noticed she always sat with her back to walls. Others observed how she never seemed startled by loud noises or sudden movements. A few sharp-eyed students even spotted the small device clipped inside her backpack. Definitely not standard school supplies. Derek's response was swift and brutal. If Hannah wanted to play games, he'd show her what real power looked like. By fourth period, cruel memes featuring Hannah's school photo were circulating on every social media platform. Kyle Rodriguez had worked his digital magic, creating fake accounts that spread rumors about her family, her background, and her reasons for transferring schools. The harassment was surgical in its precision, designed to isolate and humiliate without leaving fingerprints that could be traced back to Derek's crew. Hannah's reaction surprised everyone again. Instead of crying or demanding the posts be removed, she methodically screenshotted every single message, every comment, every share. She documented timestamps, usernames, and traced IP addresses with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. When concerned students asked if she was okay, she simply smiled and said, "Evidence collection is a beautiful thing." During this evidence-gathering phase, Hannah utilized equipment that wasn't available in any ordinary electronics store. She pulled out what appeared to be a standard smartphone, but this device was military-grade, hardened with specialized capabilities far beyond typical student needs. The encrypted communication device featured court-admissible recording quality, GPS tracking accurate to within meters, and automatic evidence backup to secure servers that couldn't be accessed or deleted by unauthorized users. Every threat, every act of violence was being recorded with legal timestamp authentication that law enforcement agencies relied on for their most sensitive operations. This was the same technology federal agents used in deep undercover missions where collecting bulletproof evidence meant the difference between justice and letting criminals walk free. The digital assault escalated when Kyle discovered Hannah's carefully crafted online presence, or rather, the complete lack of one. No Instagram filled with typical teenage photos, no TikTok videos, no Facebook timeline stretching back years. It was as if Hannah Mitchell had materialized from nowhere 3 days ago. Kyle's hacking attempts hit walls he'd never encountered before, professional-grade security that bounced his intrusion attempts back like rubber bullets. For the first time in his digital career, Kyle found himself outmatched by prey that seemed to have better tools than the predator. Brett Sullivan's surveillance revealed more anomalies. Hannah never walked the same route to classes twice. She arrived at school exactly 7 minutes before first bell and left precisely when dismissal started. No lingering, no social time, no normal teenage spontaneity. Her locker combination was memorized rather than written down, and she never forgot to spin the lock completely before walking away. Most telling of all, she carried a small notebook where she wrote in what looked like some kind of shorthand code. When Brett tried to peek over her shoulder during English class, the symbols made no sense, unless you knew they were tactical abbreviations used by law enforcement. The breaking point came during lunch on Friday. Derek had endured a week of subtle humiliation, his victim refusing to be victimized, his digital attack failing, his crew's confidence shaken. Worse, other students were starting to whisper about Hannah's resistance. If word spread that Derek Blackwood couldn't handle one transfer student, his carefully constructed empire would crumble. So he decided to make an example that would be remembered for years. The cafeteria was at peak capacity when Derek made his move. 800 students filled every table, creating the perfect audience for maximum humiliation. Hannah sat alone near the windows, methodically eating a sandwich while reading what appeared to be a legal textbook. Another detail that should have raised red flags. Derek approached with his full crew in formation, their footsteps echoing with menacing intention across the polished floor. "Attention, everyone!" Derek announced, his voice cutting through the usual cafeteria noise. Conversations died as heads turned toward the developing confrontation. "Our new student thinks she's better than the rest of us. She thinks she can disrespect Riverside traditions." Hannah looked up from her book, her expression remaining perfectly calm despite being surrounded. The students closest to the action pulled out phones, sensing drama worth recording. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Hannah replied, her voice steady and clear. "I respect all traditions that don't involve criminal activity." The cafeteria erupted in whispers. Students nudged each other, pointing and staring. Some laughed nervously while others recorded everything on their phones. Derek's face flushed red with embarrassment and rage. Marcus stepped forward first, his massive frame casting a shadow over Hannah's table. "You need to learn some respect," he growled, reaching for her textbook. Hannah's hand moved with fluid precision, not to stop him but to document the action. Her phone appeared in her palm, recording everything with professional stability. "Theft of educational materials," she noted aloud. "Misdemeanor under Texas Penal Code Section 31.03. Kyle joined the circle, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder like a weapon. "Maybe we should hack into her grades," he suggested loudly. "See how smart she really is." Hannah's smile widened slightly. "Computer fraud under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act," she recited. "Federal crime punishable by up to 10 years imprisonment." Brett positioned himself behind Hannah's chair, completing the intimidation circle. The cafeteria had gone completely silent now. 800 students watching the confrontation unfold like a gladiator match. Hannah remained seated, surrounded but somehow still in control, her phone capturing every word and gesture. Derek leaned down until his face was inches from Hannah's. "You think you're clever with your legal talk," he snarled, "but I run this school. My father runs this town. Your little law books won't help you here." His breath was hot against her face, his tone dripping with the entitled arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Hannah looked directly into Derek's eyes, and, for a moment, he saw something that made his confident facade flicker. It was the look of someone who'd seen real violence, real authority, real power, and found Derek's petty high school tyranny almost amusing by comparison. "Your father," she said quietly, "might want to update his resume soon." The cryptic comment hit Derek like a slap. How could this random transfer student know anything about his father? Sheriff Blackwood was untouchable in Riverside, his position secured by decades of political connections and mutual backscratching with local power brokers. But something in Hannah's tone suggested she knew secrets that she shouldn't. Rage overwhelmed Derek's remaining self-control. With 800 witnesses recording everything, with his reputation hanging in the balance, with this quiet girl somehow making him look weak in his own domain, Derek snapped. His knee came up fast and brutal, connecting with Hannah's face, in an explosion of blood and bone that sent her tumbling backward off her chair. The cafeteria erupted in screams and gasps. Students jumped back as blood splattered across the floor. Hannah hit the ground hard, her head bouncing once against the linoleum. For a moment, the only sound was the wet drip of blood pooling beneath her face. Then, Hannah began to laugh. It started as a quiet chuckle, then built into something that made every student in the cafeteria take an involuntary step backward. She sat up slowly, blood streaming from her nose and painting her white shirt crimson, and looked at Derek with pure satisfaction. "Perfect," she whispered, loud enough for the microphones to catch. Aggravated assault captured in 4K resolution from 12 different angles. Federal hate crime documentation complete. She wiped blood from her lips with the back of her hand, smearing it across her cheek like war paint. "You just gave me everything I needed." Derek stared down at her, confusion replacing anger as Hannah's words sank in. What did she mean by federal documentation? How did she know the exact legal terminology? And why was she acting like getting beaten was part of some larger plan? Hannah slowly pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly but maintaining her balance. Blood continued to flow from her nose, but her smile never wavered. Around them, students whispered in shocked amazement, their phones still recording every second of the impossible scene. "3," Hannah said, pulling out her specialized phone with steady hands. Derek's eyes widened as he noticed details he'd missed before. The device's unusual thickness, the military-grade case, the encrypted display that showed far more than typical smartphone screens. "2," she continued, her thumb hovering over an application that definitely wasn't available in any app store. The cafeteria held its collective breath as students sensed something massive was about to happen, something that would change everything they thought they knew about power, authority, and the quiet transfer student who'd just absorbed the worst Derek Blackwood could dish out, and smiled while doing it. Hannah's thumb moved toward the screen as she whispered, "1." The sound that would follow would bring Derek's world crashing down in ways he never imagined possible. The emergency alert activated with a soft beep that somehow carried more authority than Derek's loudest shouts. Hannah's thumb pressed the red icon labeled Operation Cascade, and within seconds her specialized device transmitted live video, audio, and GPS coordinates to a tactical response team that had been waiting 3 states away for exactly this moment. While Derek prepared what he thought would be his final devastating blow, Hannah activated the emergency response protocol on her specialized device. This crisis management system connected directly to federal tactical teams, transmitting live video and audio while sending precise coordinates for backup units. Within 30 seconds, the entire strike force would receive the signal and move into position. This was technology reserved only for the most critical missions where lives hung in the balance and justice couldn't wait for normal procedures. Derek lunged forward again, his fists clenched and ready to finish what his knee had started. But Hannah was no longer the helpless victim he'd imagined. Her training kicked in with fluid precision, not to attack, but to document and survive. She sidestepped Derek's charge with minimal effort, letting his momentum carry him past her while she maintained perfect camera angles for the recording devices now capturing everything. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," Hannah announced clearly, her voice cutting through the cafeteria's shocked silence. With her free hand, she reached into her jacket and produced a badge that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Special Agent Hannah Mitchell, Juvenile Crimes Division. Derek Blackwood, you're under arrest for organized extortion, conspiracy to commit violence, and operating a criminal enterprise across state lines." The cafeteria exploded in chaos. Students screamed, chairs scraped against floors, and phones flew up to capture every second of the impossible revelation. Derek stood frozen, his fists still raised, as the magnitude of Hannah's words crashed over him like a tsunami. FBI agent, federal crimes, state lines. This wasn't some random transfer student. This was a trained federal operative who'd been hunting him for months. Marcus, Kyle, and Brett tried to scatter, but Hannah's voice stopped them cold. Marcus Webb, Kyle Rodriguez, Brett Sullivan, you're all under arrest as co-conspirators. I strongly advise you to remain exactly where you are. Her tone carried the kind of absolute authority that comes from knowing backup is 60 seconds away and resistance is futile. The cafeteria doors burst open with military precision. 12 agents in tactical gear flooded the room, moving with coordinated efficiency that turned the chaotic scene into a controlled arrest operation. Students pressed against walls as federal agents surrounded Derek's crew, weapons drawn but pointed safely downward. The lead agent, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, approached Hannah with professional concern. "Agent Mitchell? Medical attention?" she asked, noting the blood still flowing from Hannah's nose. "Negative, Agent Carson. Primary objective complete. All evidence uploaded and secured." Hannah wiped her face with a napkin, the bleeding already slowing. Subjects walked directly into the trap, as anticipated. Derek's voice cracked with desperation and disbelief. "This is impossible. You're just a kid. You can't be FBI." But even as he spoke, he could see the truth in Hannah's eyes, in her posture, in the way the tactical team deferred to her despite her apparent age. 17 years old, Hannah confirmed, and a federal agent for 2 years. Youngest graduate in FBI Academy history. My specialty is infiltrating youth criminal networks that local authorities can't or won't address. She gestured to Derek's crew, now being efficiently handcuffed by agents who'd clearly done this many times before. Your extortion ring spans 6 states, Derek. 37 schools, over 400 victims who were too scared to speak up until we gave them a way to fight back. Principal Hayes chose that moment to arrive, probably drawn by the commotion. His face went pale when he saw federal agents in his cafeteria, paler still when he recognized several students being arrested. "What's the meaning of this? You can't just storm into my school and—" "Principal Hayes," Agent Carson interrupted, producing a folded document from her jacket. "Federal warrant for your arrest on charges of accepting bribes, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to enable criminal activity. You've been turning a blind eye to organized crime in exchange for donations to your personal retirement fund." The principal's protests died in his throat as 2 agents moved to flank him. Around the cafeteria, students watched in stunned amazement as their entire power structure collapsed in real time. The untouchable bullies were in handcuffs. The enabling administrator was under arrest. The sheriff's son was crying as agents read him his rights. Hannah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. She glanced at the screen, her expression shifting slightly as she processed new information. "Agent Carson, we have a problem. The network is bigger than we thought. 3 more schools just went dark. Principals stopped answering federal calls. Security systems mysteriously malfunctioned. Someone tipped them off." Derek, overhearing despite his handcuffs, managed a bitter laugh. "You think you got us all? My father's been building this system for 15 years. We've got people in schools from Texas to Florida. You stopped 1 cell, but there are dozens more." Agent Carson's radio crackled to life with urgent reports from other field teams. Operations in Oklahoma had found empty offices. Targets in Louisiana had vanished overnight. The arrests at Riverside High had triggered a coordinated evacuation of an entire criminal network that stretched far beyond what anyone had imagined. Hannah stared at her phone screen, where a new message appeared from an unknown number. "Nice work in Texas. See you in California soon. A friend. The message included a photo of another high school cafeteria, this one filled with students who looked remarkably similar to Derek's victims. Quiet, scared, isolated kids who clearly needed someone to stand up for them. As Derek and his crew were led away in handcuffs, students began approaching Hannah with mixtures of awe and gratitude. Some apologized for not helping her during the confrontation. Others shared their own stories of harassment they'd never reported. A freshman girl with tears in her eyes whispered, "Thank you for proving that someone cares about us." But Hannah's attention was fixed on her phone, where intelligence reports painted a picture of a network so vast and sophisticated that today's victory felt more like the opening move in a chess game than a final checkmate. The message about California suggested her next assignment was already waiting. Another school full of students who needed someone willing to take a beating to gather evidence. Agent Carson noticed Hannah's distant expression. "Good work today, Mitchell. Clean evidence collection, textbook takedown. Ready for extraction and debrief?" Hannah looked around the cafeteria one more time, taking in the faces of students who were already standing a little straighter, talking a little louder, moving like people who'd just learned that justice was possible after all. Then she looked back at her phone, where the California message waited with its promise of new challenges and new victims who needed help. "Actually, Agent Carson," Hannah said, shouldering her backpack with the same casual motion she'd used for 3 days while pretending to be a normal student, "I think I need to finish the semester. There might be more loose ends to tie up." As she walked towards the cafeteria exit, past the chalk outlines where evidence teams were documenting the crime scene, past the students who now knew her secret, Hannah's phone buzzed one more time. Another school, another message. Another group of kids who thought no one cared enough to help them fight back. She smiled, wiping the last traces of blood from her face, and typed back a simple reply. "On my way." The hunt was far from over.